Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 10-minute fiction vacays. Do you need a little break from work? A little pick-me-up? Stay tuned. My name is Marie LeClaire, and I'll be reading a short story from my website. It's about two people searching for lost family. I hope you enjoy it. It's titled, Family is Family. Paul sat in the driveway, looking at the clock on the dashboard. 7 a.m. It was a little later than he planned, but he knew that he could still make it to Albany by noon. His lunch date with Zita was important, and he didn't want to be late. It would be their first meeting since they started emailing 2 weeks ago. Nervously, he kept playing out different possible conversations in his head. What if she wasn't who he thought she was? What if she was? He realized that the outcome didn't matter. Even if he knew it would end badly, he would go anyway. He pulled out of the driveway and shifted his focus to the morning traffic. Zita sat at the kitchen table sipping her morning coffee and planning her day. Her meeting with Cole wasn't until noon. Looking up at the clock, she wondered if he had left Worcester, Massachusetts yet. It was nearly 7:30, and if he didn't leave soon, he'd be late. She offered to meet him later in the day, but he assured her that he would rather head out early than wait around for hours watching the clock, which is exactly what she would be doing today. This meeting was important, and she didn't want to lose track of time. Anxiety started to rise in her chest. She took a deep breath to shake it off. Really, she said to herself. I don't even know this guy. What's the big deal? But she knew what the big deal was. He was family. She was sure of it. She offered to meet him halfway somewhere, mostly to avoid the unlikely event of bumping into mom, dad, or anyone else she knew. No need to scare him off until she knew whether or not he was like them. She was hoping it was nurture, not nature, that made the rest of her family a little crazy. Cole propped a photo of his parents on the dashboard. He wasn't sure why. It just seemed right somehow. It was a picture of their last Christmas together. He was 6. It wasn't often they were all in the photo. In a family of 3, the most you got in any picture was 2. Someone always had to be the photographer. This picture was taken with a fancy new camera Dad had just opened for Christmas. It came with a timer and a tripod, and Dad couldn't wait to try it out. He had taken great pains setting up the timer and running into the photo just before they heard the click of the shutter. Surprisingly, it was a great shot of the family. It was the last picture taken of his parents, not counting the crime scene photos. After the murders, the authorities were unable to locate any family. Both his parents had been alone in the world, as far as he knew, except for his grandmother. At that time, she was in a nursing home, suffering from severe dementia. She died 4 years later. He never knew his grandfather or any other member of his family. The only information he'd ever heard came from the McKinneys, his adopted family. He was best friends with their son, and when no relative could be found, they stepped up to take custody of him. They had been friendly with his parents and told him whatever they knew when he asked, but they didn't know that much. The only thing they remembered anyone saying about his grandfather was that he was a ladies' man and ran off, leaving his grandmother to raise his mother alone. When his grandmother tried to get help from family, they turned her away. The McKinneys weren't sure why. Cole couldn't shake the idea that he had relatives on his mother's side of the family. What kind of family wouldn't take in a single mother with a child? Every so often, he Googled his grandmother's name, Augustina Desi, to see if anything came up. Then, one day, Zita's name showed up on a website called findyourfamily.com. Zena thought about Cole's story of his parents' murder and his placement with his best friend's family. The story sounded unlikely, but certainly possible. If this was some sort of scam, he was certainly going all out. The murders happened too long ago to rely on Google for information, so she had to take the story at face value for the moment. With what she could piece together from Cole, it appeared that his grandmother, Augustina, was somehow related to her grandfather. She wondered about a whispered conversation she'd heard years ago between her grandfather and her great aunt about a woman named Tina. She couldn't get the whole story, but her aunt had sounded judgmental and bitter. When she asked about it, they waved her off, saying it was nothing, just someone from years ago. But it sounded like more than that, and it piqued her curiosity. When she got stonewalled, she asked her mother. Mom told Zita to forget about it. It's some relative they don't talk about, so let sleeping dogs lay, she said, but Zita couldn't let it go. One day, just for fun, she posted the name Tita Desi on a People Finder website and then forgot all about it. That was a year ago. Cole thought about his adoptive parents, Alice and John McKinney. They took him in after the murders and offered to keep him when no family could be located. He hadn't really understood the enormity of their gesture until he was much older. At 6, and in emotional shock, he was glad to live with his best friend Derek and get a sister and brother in the bargain. It didn't seem like a bad thing in the beginning, but when he started to understand that his parents were not coming back, his sadness settled in for the long run. It was awkward at first. Cole kept calling his new guardians Mr. and Mrs. McKinney. When it looked like things were going to be permanent, the family had a meeting with all the kids. They decided Cole could call them mom and dad if he wanted, just because it would be easier. But even after 30 years, he knew every time he said it that it wasn't true. All you had to do was look at the family photos to know who was the odd man out. The McKinneys were as Irish as the day is long, light hair with white freckled skin. Cole had the dark hair and dark complexion of his Italian roots. He felt like the orphan he was, with no ties to this world. Sometimes it felt liberating and mysterious, a man free to wander the world. Sometimes it was lonely and depressing. Zita chose Chan's Chinese buffet for lunch, hoping to reduce the chance of bumping into someone she knew. She wasn't going to say anything to the family until she had a chance to check this guy out. If Grandma didn't want to acknowledge that Augustina existed, then having lunch with her grandson probably wouldn't go over well. Who was Augustina? Why didn't anyone talk about her? She thought about how crazy her family was and wondered what the hell you had to do to get kicked out of it. Whatever it was, maybe she'd try it. It wasn't that she didn't like her family. She just felt like she didn't belong to them somehow. Maybe it was only that she was the second generation American. Grandpa and Aunt Flo came over from Italy when they were kids. Mom's generation got watered down a bit to fit in with the new culture. As for her, she didn't feel much different than the average American. Her family was small, consisting of one younger brother and her parents. Her brother, Angelo, drank too much and bummed around aimlessly. Mom and dad, the closest to normal, were quiet, unassuming people that blended into the woodwork, satisfied with the simple life and no sense of adventure. It must be a recessive trait, she thought. Otherwise, the family never would have gotten out of Italy. The older generation included just Grandpa and Aunt Flo. Grandpa was distant and unpredictable, sometimes funny and upbeat, sometimes brooding and judgmental. Aunt Flo had a little more spunk than the rest of them, but it was seriously out of control. She never let a family occasion pass by without telling the story of how her fiance ran off with another woman, harlot, Jezebel, depending on how much wine she'd had. and how it had ruined her life, jading her against all men, save for her brother, of course, and sometimes even him. She would always caution Zita and her brother to choose carefully or end up like her, which might have something to do with why Zita was still single at 32. The McKennies were always kind, treating him like one of the family. He and Derek remained best friends throughout elementary and secondary school, playing on the same sports teams and joining the same clubs. They were the first to head out for college, Derek for political science, Cole for architecture. They hadn't consciously decided to attend different colleges, but they hadn't picked the same ones either. Cole figured they both needed to get away from each other for a little while, but neither one wanted to say it out loud. Being away from family heightened Cole's long-held feeling that he didn't really belong to the McKinneys. He saw them more as placeholders in some way, important, loving, but not real family. In high school, he became more interested in what had happened to his family. He secretly read the news clippings of the murders and the subsequent trial over and over. With each reading, his understanding became more dimensional, more detailed, more vivid. He didn't tell the McKinneys what he was doing. He was afraid they would think he was ungrateful for their generosity. College gave him a freedom to dive into whatever he could find about the crime that had taken the life of his parents, the murders, and the psychology of violence. He became obsessed with it. He read through court records and arrest reports. He read studies and essays on violent behavior, desperate to understand why this happened. He even requested the file from the Department of Family Services and reviewed the information about his custody hearings. That was where he found out that the state had located relatives who had declined to take him. He was stunned and then crushed. The same family that didn't want his grandmother or mother had also passed on taking him in, even given the horrific circumstances. After he graduated from college, he resolved to leave the past alone. The only time he gave it any energy was when he got a letter from the parole board saying that the murderers were up for a hearing. He always wrote back, and when he absolutely had to, he presented his concerns to the parole board in person. Otherwise, he did his best to move forward. After her emails with Cole, Zita felt a heightened curiosity about Tina. She expanded her search into the US Census records, which were now easily available online. She was shocked by what she found. In the 1910 census, it clearly indicated that Grandpa and Aunt Flo had a sister, Augustina. She didn't mention it to Cole. She wanted to get a better feel for him before she said too much. She certainly wasn't going to say anything to Grandpa. She couldn't imagine what would cause him to turn his back on his sister, essentially erasing her memory from the family. Just how crazy were these people? She accidentally, on purpose, bumped into a neighbor who lived beside her grandparents for years. After bringing the conversation around to the old days, she slipped in a reference to Tina. The old woman got very uncomfortable. She said she couldn't remember anything about any Tina. Zita managed to get in a short apology for upsetting her before the woman made a quick exit. This was getting more interesting by the minute. Lunch with Zita had been awkward, neither of them sure of what to say. Afterward, Cole sat in his car, taking deep breaths and trying to process the conversation he just had. The news that she had located Augustina in the census as a sister to her grandfather was shocking, although he wasn't sure why he was surprised. After all, he suspected there was a connection. But sister? Who disowns their sister so completely? Somehow the proof caught him off guard. Emotionally off-center, he decided to stay overnight in Buffalo and head out early in the morning. Things in Worcester could wait until he got back. Wandering around Buffalo for the afternoon, He took in the sights and sounds of his grandmother's hometown. He found himself imagining her everywhere he looked. Where did she live, work, play, go to school? He never knew her and recalled visiting her only twice as a small child. He had no stories, no photos, just an overactive imagination. Lunch had been a little less tense, but Zita felt confident that Cole was neither conman nor psycho killer. After hearing more of the heartbreaking story of his parents' murders, she was committed to introducing him to his family. It had the potential to be explosive, so she wanted to think it through. Once again, she wondered what caused such a complete severance of ties so long ago. And did her mother know more than she was letting on? She stopped by her mother's house for dinner that night, knowing that her father would be at church until 7, giving her plenty of time to chat with her mom about family history and maybe share a secret or two. Her mother was uncharacteristically uncooperative, making Zita all the more curious. Her mother reiterated her previous warning with more emphasis. Let sleeping dogs lay. But Zita's heart had already connected with Cole. His search for his family touched her deeply. Her own desire to find a kindred spirit continued to push her forward. The plan to meet his family developed through a series of emails and phone calls following his first visit with Zita. She insisted that the news be shared in person, without forewarning, starting with meeting her parents. He didn't feel good about it, though. He couldn't help but wonder if this was the family he really wanted. Well, he didn't have to pursue anything if he didn't want to. So he booked a hotel room near the address that Zita had given him. It was the home of Zita's mother and father, his first cousins once removed, according to Zita. He took her word for it. The plan was to arrive at the house on Friday before her mother got home from work. She would introduce him to her mother and let the dust settle before her dad got home. Then introduce him to her dad, using her mother as a buffer. Meeting Grandpa and Aunt Flo would wait for another visit. This strategy of sneak attack worried Cole, but Zita assured him this was the best approach. He had no choice but to defer to her judgment. Unbeknownst to Zita, her mother had taken both Aunt Flo and Grandpa to the doctors that day for flu shots. Zita and Cole entered the house to find them sitting in the living room, while her mother was in the kitchen starting dinner. Hello, dear, Aunt Flo greeted her. Come here, give your auntie a kiss. Zita was caught completely off guard. As she leaned in for a kiss, Aunt Flo followed with, and tell me who you've brought home with you. Well, stammered Zita. Aunt Flo knew something was up. Come on, girl, get it out, she sneered. Zita panicked. She knew she couldn't lie. The truth would come out eventually. Well, Aunt Flo, Grandpa, this is Cole. His grandmother was Augustina Desi. Aunt Flo instantly lost control. Get out of here, you son of whores. Get out, I say. I want nothing to do with you. Go back to your whore of a grandmother and let the sins of the mother be visited upon her children. Zita and Cole were stunned. Grandpa was silent. Mom, who had come to the kitchen doorway, stood perfectly still, eyes wide, watching the scene unfold. Aunt Flo, Zita tried to take control of the situation. We are not leaving until we know the truth, she said calmly but firmly. That is the truth, Aunt Flo spat out. His grandmother is a whore. Now get out. Cole took Zita's arm and tried to steer her to the door, but Zita pressed on. Aunt Flo, was Augustina your sister? Not anymore, she's not. Blood or no blood. Aunt Flo paused in her tirade for a split second. What do you mean was? What is she, dead? There was a moment of silence when neither Zita nor Cole offered an answer. Well, I'm glad she's dead. I hope she died alone and bitter, just as I will, screamed Flo as she got up and headed out the door. I want nothing to do with you. Zita and Cole stood there, frozen. She looked over at Grandpa, who was visibly shaken. He stared back at her, waiting for the silence to be broken. Grandpa, are you okay? I'm sorry. I had no idea this would be so crazy. No, it's okay. Grandpa tried to catch his breath. I could use a little brandy, though, if you don't mind. Grandpa's voice was shaky. Of course. Zita rushed over to the small bar. Cole finally found his voice. I'm very sorry, sir. I'll leave if you like. Zita was just about to protest when Grandpa raised his hand. No, I'm glad this is over, he said as he put his head into his hands and began to cry. Zita was at his side in a moment with a glass of amber liquid. Oh, Grandpa, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I'm so stupid. I just charge into everything. Grandpa took a big swallow of brandy, then took Zita's hand. It's not your fault. This is what a lifetime of resentment does to people. Grandpa, what are you talking about? The woman who ran off with Aunt Flo's fiance was our sister, Augustina. Oh my God, cried Zita. Her mother, still frozen in the doorway, let out a gasp. Flo never got over it and never forgave her, not in all these years. Grandpa paused to take another drink. She bullied me back then into wiping Augustina out of the family. It wasn't that hard, what with Augustina gone and all. I just went along with it because it was easier than upsetting Flo. I know it was wrong. So you didn't even know that Cole existed, Zita offered, hoping to let Grandpa off the hook a little bit. Oh, we knew, Grandpa said, shaking his head and weeping again. I'm so sorry, boy. I felt there was nothing I could do. Flo forbid it. Grandpa, what are you talking about? Zita insisted. Grandpa shook his head and said nothing. Cole stepped quietly into the pause. I think I know. He paused to make sure Grandpa was okay. The social workers came here, didn't they, 30 years ago? Yes, but Flo's wounds were deep and painful. She felt it was more of God's vengeance on Augustina. More? Asked Cole. Yes, a few years after Augustina left with Paul, that was Flo's fiance. She came back saying that Paul had run off and left her. She was alone with a baby, your mother, and needed help. Flo called her all sorts of names and said she was no longer part of this family, that this was God's punishment for what she had done. Grandpa held up an empty glass to Zita. I'll have a little more, please. Zita readily obliged. I wouldn't mind a shot of that myself if it's okay. Cole looked to Grandpa for approval. By all means, Grandpa waved a hand to Zita on Cole's behalf. I'll join you, Zita agreed, as she set up two more glasses. Count me in, her mother chimed in from the kitchen doorway, all the color gone from her face. Grandpa looked Cole up and down. It's good to finally meet you, son, he said with tears in his eyes. Please sit down. Cole took a seat across from Grandpa. Thank you, sir. Likewise. I don't mean to stir things up. But is Aunt Flo going to be okay? Should someone check on her? Grandpa waved his hand. Oh no, she'll be fine. She's just a damn drama queen. Zita looked at Cole, nodded agreement, and took a seat on the sofa. Best to let her burn it off, Zita's mother added, taking a seat on one of the upholstered chairs. They all sat in silence, sipping their brandy, no one knowing what to say next. Grandpa broke the silence. Are you going to be staying around here, Cole? Just for another day or two. I have to get back to work. Oh, and what do you do? I'm an architect for a firm in Worcester, Mass. There was another pause. Do you think you might be coming back around here for another visit? Grandpa looked down at his glass. I'd like that, sir, if you think it's okay. It was Cole who was fighting back tears now. I think it's more than okay, Grandpa said, nodding his head. I think I'd like that too. We've come to the end of the story. I'm happy you stayed with me. I hope you're feeling better than when we started. Sometimes all it takes is a little vacay in the middle of the day. If you're wanting more stories, you can check out other postings here on YouTube, and you can also visit my website, marie-leclaire.com. The links are in the description below. And please like and comment before you go. I'll see you at the next vacay. I wonder where that will be.